So that triggered, obviously, a very quick and very detailed investigation. And the first thing I would like to do is to thank Special Agent in Charge James Deere from ATF Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to my right, and their ongoing partnership in our substation for violent crimes involving firearms. I've said for quite some time that you'll see a small number of people commit a large number of crimes. And that's often what we see. And with their partnership, we target those folks that have committed violent crimes and try to hold them accountable and try to get them serious penalties to keep them off the street, because we've seen the tragic outcome when that doesn't happen with our own murdered Deputy Reckling and other cases where you've seen violent offenders back out in a position to hurt other people, including the individual on Christmas Eve who had been recently let out and then murdered a woman and shot others on Christmas Eve. So thank you, Special Agent in Charge Deere, for the partnership with ATF on this and other cases. So again, specific to this case, the Pontiac substation, who I'm going to brag on for a second, I think their clearance rate is probably preeminent in the country on homicides. They do such an amazing job, and they do it so quickly. I think all but one of last year has already been charged. Every homicide. One homicide's one too many, but every homicide save one, and that's still under investigation, has already had individuals charged with those homicides. So they've been identified and charged. And in this particular case, they were starting pretty much from ground zero. They had masked individuals, gloved individuals that had burst into this business. And as they burst into the business, they basically executed the owner. They shot him in the head, then zip-tied him, and then put a bag over his head. And so obviously a cautionary tale to marijuana businesses, because they're in the business of two things that are valuable to criminals, both cash, which at this particular location didn't have, but oftentimes they do, like at a dispensary. So you get cash and drugs. In this situation, they did not obtain money, but we think they took probably in the area of 50 pounds of marijuana. So the forensic team went out with our detectives and the responding deputies, and they worked very quickly. They did have security footage. They had a vehicle, but it didn't have plates that were visible, and so they were kind of working, behind the eight ball. But they worked very quickly, used investigative techniques, which I won't disclose because we like to catch people, and we don't want them to adapt and evolve. But suffice to say, they were able to get a lot of information very, very quickly. Turns out that the suspects, or at least one of the suspects involved in this, had met the owners at Hash Bash in Ann Arbor and had talked about some kind of interaction, some kind of business dealing. And that's where they originally met. And so one individual was let into the building, and as he was leaving, the others burst in that were masked up and gloved up at the time of the crime. So as I said, they pushed in, immediately shot and killed the owner, zip-tied him, and then put a bag over his head. Were able to take a fair amount, obviously a sizable amount of marijuana, and then flee, again, with their plates obscured and with vehicles that were kind of generic descriptions. But through great investigative work, great partnerships, they were able to track the individuals to Ohio in a relatively short time frame, and they were able to identify potential suspects. And working with the partners of, in addition to ATF Detroit, ATF Cincinnati Police Department, our fugitive apprehension team, with our substation and the Cincinnati Crime Gun Intelligence Center, probably over 50 law enforcement personnel in a relatively short, I think, time period, were able to move all these parts together, track individuals to Ohio, and now have taken 3 suspects into custody. We're continuing the investigation to determine if others if there's other involvement and to what extent, and if they are also eligible, and if so, for charges, what charges. So it's an ongoing thing since it's happened obviously very quickly. Search warrants have been served at multiple locations in Ohio where we have recovered evidence. So far, we have recovered 3 guns, one of which matches the caliber of a weapon that was, we believe, was a caliber used on scene at the murder, a 45 caliber handgun. So we have casings on scene and a 45 caliber handgun in custody in Ohio, and that obviously will get the next steps to determine if it's a match. So again, great work. 3 people we believe very much to be our suspects in custody. I think they've been named by the prosecutor, so we'll show their pictures when this is over. But again, I'd like to thank our partners. Special Agent Deere, you want to say anything?
Sure. I think this case represents how law enforcement is supposed to work. We had a horrific crime in the community by offenders not from this community who came up here with the sole intent to rob these folks and kill them. This is what they did. And this partnership makes sense because ATF is laser focused on identifying violent crime that is facilitated through illegal firearms. And in this instance, they're all convicted felons. They were armed, and they are prohibited. We will potentially seek a petite policy waiver on this, which is they can charge, everybody charged in the state will follow through with federal charges. Because this type of crime is not acceptable in this community. In the state of Michigan, it's not acceptable. In the country, it's not acceptable. We've got 3 guns that we're going to enter into our integrated ballistic information network and check it throughout the Great Lakes region and the country to see what else these guys have been involved in. The gun tells the story for us. We follow the gun. That is the piece that ATF brings to this partnership. We follow the gun, and we've got nationwide resources. And in this instance, this worked. You've got 3 suspects that, as soon as they perpetrated this crime, they took mass quantities of marijuana and got out of the state. Traditionally, this would have been a longer solve rate for folks that aren't partnering. Okay, so our partnership, it was a phone call. It was a phone call down to Cincinnati saying, "Hey, we've got 3 guys that we know are going down there," and they moved within minutes. And this dragnet was complete. This is how it's supposed to work. And Sheriff, your Pontiac unit is just phenomenal. You've got some of the best detectives I've ever seen in my 29 years with ATF. They are phenomenal. They move with a purpose. And this partnership's not about mass incarceration, right? It's about targeting the small percentage of the population that is coming to Oakland County and committing crime. These folks are typically from Detroit, and they're finding their way up here, or they're typically from the Detroit metro area. And they find their way up here, and they commit crime. And we've seen it time and time again. We've got a gentleman, I say gentleman, we got an individual, I would call him a predator, that targeted somebody else, Christopher Bay. That is another example of this task force working for the community. And this is an example, sir, of your leadership with your detectives and with this partnership. This partnership was your idea, and it has bared fruit for the community that we all serve, and it's been phenomenal. I couldn't thank you.
Yeah, and I'll put an exclamation point on that partnership. You know, if you also remember the splash pad shooting, quick partnership with the ATF on that helped us immediately determine who owned that firearm, and they quickly got to that residence, found the suspect vehicle, and surrounded it. And, you know, in my opinion, that may not have been the end of the day for him. As I said, there was an AR platform rifle on the kitchen table, but he had already been hard locked down in that residence and wasn't able to go back out. Because in the first shooting at the splash pad, he had 2 handguns. But he also had an AR platform weapon on the kitchen table, and I don't think that was for a breakfast accompaniment. I think that was for future activity. And by that quick partnership identifying who owned that firearm that had been found at the scene of shooting number 1, putting a rapid perimeter on that home, that situation was contained. So this partnership has worked time and time again, and I appreciate it. And it, again, 1 homicide's one too many, but we think every time this partnership kicks into gear, it often prevents other homicides that are going to happen. And, I'll go over it again. These are people that have shown propensity for violence, have been caught with firearms, and are in a position to hurt people again. And they need to be held accountable all across this country. You've seen it with Deputy Reckling. You saw it at the shooting on Christmas Eve. You see it in this case, convicted felons with guns. Michigan State University shooter had been caught with a gun and pled down and was able to go get another gun. If you're caught carrying and using a gun illegally, there needs to be real and serious consequences. And we continue to see that fallout. And all we have seen out of Lansing and Washington typically is, how do we get more people out of prison? I'm good with letting people out of prison that are nonviolent offenders. I don't want them in my jail. I don't think they need to be in prison if you're a nonviolent offender. But if you're an offender that's caught carrying and using a gun illegally, you need to feel the full weight of the law. And that is still not happening across this country or this state. So, and the last thing that I'll mention before I take questions is the family is obviously terribly distraught, and they're asking the media not contact them as they try to process what has happened to their family. Yes?
Can you, two questions. One, does he have children? Is he a father, grandfather?
Yes.
Which one?
He has children.
He's a father?
Yes.
What's the name of the business, the marijuana business?
Well, I don't want to get too specific on the location because we don't necessarily want to tee it up for somebody that, maybe I'll go there.
We have the, okay. What kind of business was
So it was a marijuana grow operation. I would ask that you not identify the specific location. We don't want to make them the subject of a second attempt by somebody else. You know the area in which it's in, but again, it's a cautionary tale to anybody, in any business, obviously, to be aware of your circumstances, surroundings, and security, but especially in the marijuana business. Before it was all made legal here, I was seeing other states that had it legal and seeing how often those licensed facilities were being victimized by criminality because they can steal the product as well as cash. So, a cautionary tale to folks that are licensed in this business in the state. You may want to up your game with your security protocols.
Sheriff, can you say if this is a legal marijuana business?
This is licensed by the city. At this point, quite frankly, we've not been able to get an answer from the state on its status on that level, but it is licensed by the city.
50 pounds of marijuana, is that an acceptable amount?
That's what is estimated to have been taken. All of that's part of the investigation.
Last question. Do you believe that this was a targeted attack, or could there be others in the works?
Yeah, we very much believe it was targeted at this facility, at this individual, because they had encountered him at the hash bash and, did this preparatory thing, I think, primarily to set them up. Yes?
You mentioned they weren't from the suspects. Were they from Cincinnati then?
Ohio, yes.
Okay. And then as far as can you kind of elaborate on what their previous convictions may have been? I think you said they were all convicted felons, is that correct? And was that case in Michigan or was that outside of Michigan?
They're convicted felons. Are they in Michigan or is it Ohio? Ohio.
Okay.
And it's a litany of offenses that they all have been convicted of, from drugs to gun possession to, just a litany of things.
Do you have an estimated monetary value of the 50 pounds stolen?
We can ask an expert what it is, you know, for a facility these days, what 50 pounds would mean monetarily, but, you know, that's been low on our priority list so far, catching the folks that did it, and anybody else that may be involved, that's going to be our priority, and then we'll obviously fill in some of these blanks.
But it appears, at least to the suspects, that monetary value was worth, they were going into murder. It wasn't like a robbery gone wrong. You believe they were planning on killing him the whole time?
I don't know what their plan was, but I can tell you within the first 10 seconds of coming in the door, he was shot in the face.
Pretty violent offense. You shoot somebody in the face, you mean it.
'Cause I believe the press release from the prosecutor's office said something about struggle. Was there some sort of struggle to your knowledge?
Yeah, as soon as they came in the door, there was a brief struggle, and he was shot.
The 10 seconds is all.
It was super brief. I mean, if it wasn't 10 seconds, it may have been less, or it may have been 5 seconds more. It wasn't much of a difference.
And another quick clarifying question. Do you know if the firearm was a stolen firearm or?
That's still a work in process, and it still has to be matched. As I said, there were 3 weapons that were taken in custody with the 3 different arrests, and one matches the caliber. We'll have to determine if it matches the casings in the actual crime.
You mentioned there may be other suspects. Do you have any idea how many?
We're just going to take this where it goes. You know, who else knew about it? What was their involvement? We feel very confident of the 3 we have, that they were all in that building.
So were there only 3 other men in the building at the same time?
I'm not going to get too deep into the details, but we feel very confident all 3 of these are very much involved. And I'll actually show you their pictures.
Can I ask one question?
Yep.
Were there more than 3 men that entered the building?
Yeah, I mean, we're still looking into who's connected to who. It's kind of an ongoing thing. So that's one of our suspects that has been charged in Ohio. That's when he was taken into custody in Ohio. Typically, again, we wouldn't show names or photographs till they're formally arraigned, but they've been named. This is the second individual we believe is the shooter. And I think I may have missed this. This is the third.
And not to
Yep.
be nitpicky, I just want to make sure the spelling's correct, because the press release and the spelling of profit is a little bit different. Is it P-R-O-F-F-E-T or P-H-E-T?
You mean?
Not to be nitpicky, but I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, you mean the prosecutor's press release?
Yeah, it said P-H-E-T-T. It is.
PH. That might have been a fat thumb.
And is that his legal last name as well?
Yes.
Do you know when they'll be arraigned?
Work in progress. As soon as we know, we'll obviously let you know. And obviously there's going to be, you know, it's in Ohio, so we've got the extradition process, things like that.
Are they in custody here in Michigan?
They're in Ohio. Yeah, they got out of the state very fast. Thank you.